Like, what advice would you give someone who might have an opportunity to step into the family business and take over?
Family dynamics are very complicated. It's not easy. Family businesses are not easy. It was not easy transitioning from my dad. Boy, was it. It was a doozy.
Do you ever wish you could quit your job and pursue your dreams? Maybe that lingering business idea that's been in the back of your head? This isn't another series about million-dollar ideas. Bizpirations features stories of everyday people just like you, people just like me, but the difference is they chose to take a chance. 99% of people will stay exactly where they are. These are the 1%, the other 1% that chose to be different. Let's dive in. Kris, thank you for having us out at Villa Vanilla and Rainforest Spices today. Before we get into how you became running the farm here, why don't you tell the audience something specific that they need to know?
Well, first off, thanks for joining us today. It should be raining. Should be rainy season right now, but we're going through some drought. But we got you guys covered. Yeah, something you might not know about me. Not your typical standard Costa Rican, or as you'd say in Costa Rica, a tico. I was born here, born and raised, but I'm pretty much first generation tico. My dad is of Polish descent. He was born in Germany slightly after the Second World War. Tricky time there. So they ended up, my grandparents ended up moving to relocating to the Midwest, Chicago. That's where my dad grew up. Still, till the day that he died, he still would call himself a rock and roll gringo. He really does not consider himself European. And my mom is from Hong Kong. So both of my parents met here while they were in Costa Rica. They both had been living here for a while. And this is where my story starts. Maybe let's start before I took over the farm. So my dad started the farm back in 1987. Coming from a strict business background, he pretty much had no background in agriculture. With a couple of other expats, they decided out of a whim to start a vanilla farm in the middle of nowhere, because technically back then it was in the middle of nowhere. And since 1987, they've been growing vanilla on this property. Around 2019, I have pretty much officially taken over the farm. My dad had been going through some health problems, and we were just kind of trying to maintain the family business. There was a good project that was going on, and didn't want to lose it, and didn't want to see that failing or going away with my dad, kind of passing on with him. But before I came into the farm, I actually studied civil engineering. I always was very good at math in school, and really didn't know what I want to do when I was 17, 16. And the thing was to become an engineer if you were good in math. So I did that 6-7 years and was working in the business. And around 2019, just kind of stumbled on the farm.
What was your first job that you ever had?
Out of college, engineering. So what I did was I did quality control at a precast concrete plant. We built pretty much very specialized concrete projects, kind of what they call TBM, tunnel boring machines, these huge kind of worm-like structures that are a couple 100 feet long, and they kind of make holes into a mountain, and the lining for that. And we also kind of we're building bridge beams and stuff like that. That was pretty much my only job before coming onto the farm.
And what was it like growing up with the farm here? Was this a place that you came often as a child?
Yes. So coincidentally, the farm, my dad purchased the farm the year I was born. So pretty much that inception of both kind of came about the same time. So I have been coming to the farm ever since, strictly as vacation. You kind of knew what my dad was doing a little bit, but there was really, I would say I didn't have a full scope of actually what was going on until I kind of came about here and kind of shadowed him a little bit before I actually took over. But yeah, I've been coming here all my life. Enjoyed the farm, enjoy running around here, spent a lot of good vacations here. Yeah, pretty much my hangout spot.
Was this ever, when you were a kid, was the spot you're in now ever something that you envisioned for yourself?
Never thought. I never even thought about that transition, never really thought about running the farm. It was never even a thought about what would occur once my dad was unable to run the farm. Yeah, it was never really a thought.
And why don't you tell the audience, what is Villa Vanilla Rainforest Spices? Where are we?
So right now we are in the Central Pacific. We are in still, I think, the district of Quepos. It's called Villanueva. And we've been a tropical spice farm since 1987. They started off strictly just growing vanilla. Vanilla is a very intensive crop. It's very hard to grow. It's actually the second most expensive spice in the world. And when my dad was growing vanilla initially, they did not really know what they were doing, but they were very successful nevertheless. Yield was very high in the farm. If you would walk the farm, the plantation back then, it would kind of resemble what you think of as a farm, kind of cornfield in Kansas, where you have these clearly defined roads. Instead of corn, there'd be vanilla there. What essentially happened, because there was such a lack of understanding of agriculture, that they lost all the vanilla due to intensive agricultural practices. They depleted the soil of nutrients. Stress came into the farm in the form of a disease, and it wiped out roughly 20,000 vanilla plants overnight. When they started over the vanilla project on its second phase, my dad read this book called Secrets of the Soil, which talked about biodynamic agriculture. So there was a huge kind of swing in the pendulum where from conventional agriculture, they wanted to go to a more sustainable route. And he started pretty much farming in the rainforest. Nobody knows, if nobody has a background on what vanilla is. Vanilla is actually an edible orchid, and vanilla grows native in the tropical rainforests of Central America and southern Mexico. So we are literally in the birthplace of vanilla. So what they wanted to do, his vision was to grow vanilla within the rainforest to kind of have that ecosystem, kind of have that pretty much natural immunity built into the farm. So anything would happen down the line, the farm would pretty much be covered. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of a rainforest becoming sick. That pretty much does not happen often. So that's what they do now. Together with bringing vanilla over to a more sustainable route, they wanted to plant in other types of tropical spices. So today besides vanilla, we grow around 15 to 20 additional spices. And to kind of get some extra income coming into the farm, since we are so close to Manuel Antonio, they decided running a tour. This happened around 15 years ago. And part of the tour is to actually bring guests in and show them what goes on the farm.
What you mentioned, vanilla is the second most expensive spice. What goes into that to make it so expensive?
A couple just quick facts about vanilla. Vanilla is very labor intensive. You only get one crop a year. So vanilla is actually an edible orchid. It's the only edible orchid inside the entire orchid family. There's roughly anywhere between 30 to 32,000 species of orchids. And basically, once the vanilla orchid flower is pollinated, it's the only orchid that produces edible fruit. But that vanilla bean, that very iconic associated with vanilla, that vanilla bean is the edible fruit. Unlike other things in the rainforest that are pollinated naturally, be it by hummingbirds, be it by insects, bees, etc., vanilla is rarely pollinated by nature, so much so that the statistic that's thrown out is roughly around 99% of everything that is pollinated has to be pollinated by hand. So humans actually have to stand in and do the pollination. Not only that, the curing method of vanilla is very drawn out. Vanilla does not necessarily go through a drying process. It goes more through what's called very slow fermentation. This takes around 4 to 5 months. So from the time you actually pollinate one vanilla flower until that vanilla bean is actually able to be sold to the audience, to the public, you're looking at roughly between 1.5 to 2 years.
So you're actually going around and pollinating the vanilla yourself.
The pollination of vanilla coincides with our dry season. So roughly from December through Easter is flowering season on the farm. So yeah, these vanilla orchid flowers are popping up all throughout the day, and there's people walking around all pollinating these vanilla flowers. Why is it so tricky? Flowering takes a lot of energy from plants, so usually flowering does not last very long. With vanilla, you kind of put an exclamation mark to that. We kind of put it on in bold and highlight it because vanilla will maybe pop open only for once a day. So roughly from around 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. in the morning is a 5-hour period where you pollinate those orchid flowers. If you miss that pollination period, you pretty much miss a vanilla bean from that one orchid flower.
And how do you pollinate it?
What you do is, this is more kind of biology, but it'll make sense. The vanilla orchid flower is hermaphrodite in nature, so it has both reproductive organs. It has male and female. So basically what you're doing is you're passing over the female pollen over to the male side manually. Nature has a very hard time at doing this. People always ask, how did vanilla grow then back then? The little vanilla that was out there was pollinated naturally by bees, but it was just kind of allowed to kind of just coexist in the rainforest. When humans came along and started adding it to their ice cream, there definitely wasn't enough to go around. So we do have to go in there and kind of give it a little nudge.
Let's talk about when you took over here. What was the moment, the conversation, the realization? Where were you currently working?
I was working in the area. I was working here in Quepos. Coincidentally, the concrete plant is also here. So I was kind of hanging out with my dad, shadowing a little bit for the last couple of years. I've been on and off all over the country. When I was working as an engineer, I'd been in on the Caribbean coast, Limon. I did a little stint in Panama too. And then their headquarters was here always. So I'd always kind of trickle back here eventually. And my dad had always been complaining. He was a little older, always been complaining. It was a lot of work here on the farm. Didn't have enough help. He always wanted to kind of go back to the family. He didn't want anybody else from the outside to come in. So I was a little sick and tired of my job. Really didn't see it going anywhere. Kind of at a standstill there. And I decided, hey, I always hear my dad, we go out to dinner and he'd always be complaining. It's so much work, so much to do here on the farm. We got the farm going on and the tourism side. And he said, hey, what the heck? I can kind of go in there and maybe be my own boss, or at least kind of coexist with my dad there on the farm and just give it a shot. Never been very afraid to try anything new. I am very calculated, which is a little rare of a move to kind of move to something like that. So different from my field initially. But yeah, it was mainly it. Just hearing my dad complain a lot about the farm.
Tell me about the day you went all in and you quit your job. What was it? What was the feeling going into the office and walking out? And I had
a very good relationship with my boss. She almost saw me as a son. He was kind of like my mentor. He took me under his wing for my stint there on the company around, just kind of ballparking from six to 8 years. I was there pretty much. And eventually I didn't really feel like I was going anywhere there. I kind of grew tired of my job a little bit. I was looking for maybe something new. Now that I look back on it, it wasn't really that dramatic. I'd thought about it a little bit. It kind of worked out for me because I'd been in this area a little bit, so it really wasn't anything that alien. But coming from the farm was definitely coming onto it and just seeing the actual extent of what was going on was, I wouldn't say traumatic, but I was definitely very surprised at what I found when I was here. it's actually really hard as one person to simultaneously run a very large-scale vanilla farm, spice farm, and tourism operation at the same time, which she had been doing. When I did see that clearly when I was here, I knew that there was a lot of work to be done. On the farm side, a lot of the vanilla, a lot of the stuff had kind of been left rogue, kind of just the rainforest. The rainforest does take care of itself, but with vanilla does need a lot of care, also adding to the aspect of why it is so expensive on the marketplace. But yeah, a lot of the stuff on the farm was kind of let go a little bit. And from the tourism side, a lot of vendors, if you go back to that period and read some of the reviews back then, my dad had a very good product. He was very visionary, had a good idea of what he wanted to do on the farm. Execution wasn't the best. But yeah, when I came in, putting the house in order a little bit, getting up to date. My dad was extremely old school. I'll say that again. He was very old school to the point where I think back then the farm was not running with kind of what they call municipal patents and all that. So pretty much there was nothing in order. He was kind of what we like to say, operating under the radar. So there was a lot of kind of bringing in the farm to the 21st century. Technology-wise, a lot of more controls put in, especially at the front end of the house. A lot of where the income was coming, and just kind of have a paper trail of a lot of that stuff.
When did you first take over the farm? 2019?
2019, maybe around officially. Yeah, 2019, right before the high season. Another obstacle was thrown into the whole beast there, where it was nice to have a high season because that's where the farm's kind of operating on full cylinders. Pretty much you have to be on your feet there. There's no snoozing. And then suddenly, in March 2020, everybody got this huge rude awakening of actually seeing how fragile the tourism sector is. I'd say worldwide. So it was a very steep learning curve in the beginning. Kind of managing resources a lot, juggling a lot of things. Pretty much the entire tourism side was put on halt. As we all know what happened, airport was shut down, I think anywhere from 10 months to a year maybe. So tourism kind of fell apart, crumbled, and there was a lot of kind of managing the farm there. I have zero agricultural background. Every day is still learning process. I think you never will fully grasp growing vanilla. I think my dad, even how as experienced as he was, there's always something to learn with vanilla. There's always something to learn with farming in general. But yeah, that's pretty much, I think, where I came in fully in the farm, right before the high season 2019.
And since then, aside from, I guess, why don't we talk about some of the technology you brought in, but what other changes have you made since taking over?
Being more transparent in the farm, bringing a lot of more transparency towards employees in the farm in general, and also towards the audience, our clients. Just a little bit of technology. I wouldn't even call it technology. I would just call it normal business endeavor. I wouldn't say that we actually brought in anything that innovative. Having the entire front house in order, having a POS system, which means that anything that comes from that's just considering the front end of the farm. For example, if somebody just comes into the spice shop, or if we have an order somehow, have that somehow recorded into the system. So number one, you know how much you're making each month. And number two, generally, you can kind of set some trends along the year. You can project how much you're selling, how much inventory you have, etc. Yeah, technology-wise, it sounds groundbreaking when I talk about it right now, but it's really not that innovative. having a credit card system, having people be able to play with a credit card, which my dad was always strictly against. I don't know why. He always had a credit card, and he did use his credit card abundantly. I don't know why he did not want to go through the hassle of having that. Yeah, that's a little bit of technology. Right now, we're big in e-commerce. Costa Rica is kind of in its infancy a little bit. I don't know why it's so hard here to do e-commerce, but that's something that we also kind of start implementing, kind of having what they call kind of an online booking portal where reservations will come in pretty much automatically. So you can be halfway around the world. I can be sleeping in the comfort of my bed and browse through the inbox in the morning and see all those tour bookings come in the morning. A little bit of that mostly.
And what about from a like an infrastructure standpoint? You know, what was here and what have you improved upon?
The farm has a lot of natural beauty. Tricky part about running this is everything can grow amok very quickly. Rainforest will take control of everything. I mean this from infrastructure that we have on the farm, and also just the rainforest taking control of the farm itself. If paths are not clear, my dad, it's a pretty old farm. I mean, if you kind of do the math, you're talking about roughly 36 years. So in 36 years, a lot of growth happens in the farm. We're in the tropics here, so stuff grows very quickly. Just speaking in general, wood is a very nice accent here. My dad was fascinated with using wood for infrastructure. One of the drawbacks of using wood is you're literally using natural, you're using nature, using natural materials. Maintenance is through the roof. You're always at odds with nature. There's kind of this tug of war where you're building, you're encroaching on the rainforest, and every single day you get this rude awakening from the rainforest telling you, hey, buddy, wait a minute, you're in my turf right now. So we kind of built upon a little bit of infrastructure. A lot of the sites where we have built on, we pretty much built on that. There was a lot of knocking down of old infrastructure and building new kind of to accommodate larger groups. We still like using wood on the farm. Like I said, wood is a very nice accent. There's a lot of warmth with wood, kind of more connection. There's not as cold as metal, but definitely a lot of structural elements. I'm just talking from an engineering standpoint here. A lot of structural elements. Sometimes seeing some of the old infrastructure my dad had built, I couldn't even sleep at night thinking about if that thing was going to collapse the next day. That was some of it did do, but that was just more building upon what my dad had, kind of fortifying a little bit, building more with metal a little bit, but still keeping a little bit that natural aspect kind of intertwined with it always.
And so, I mean, taking over this with really zero farming background other than just, you know, kind of shadowing your dad, was there anyone who was trying to give you advice that just turned out to be awful advice in the end?
It was hard dealing with my dad at the end of his life. He was going through a lot of health problems. There was a lot of dementia involved. We could not really squeeze that much knowledge from him. From the business side, it was not that necessary because it's a little more tangible with the business side. I think it's a little quicker to get up your feet and kind of get in the groove of what's going on the farm. With the agricultural part, one of the things that I do kind of regret is not being able to get that much information from him, because he was just wealth of knowledge from that side. Advice, I have to say that I'll go to the positives and then we'll go to the negative. We have a very strong team on the farm here. We have a lot of our personnel has been on the farm for a while. My dad did head up the farm, but this goes for all farms in general. Farm is as good as its pretty much entire personnel. So even though you have this PhD boss running whatever business in general, if the people that actually execute everything on the farm are not up to par or know what they're doing, pretty much, what is that worth? That's worth nothing. A lot of the stuff here on the farm, a lot of the day-to-day stuff is done by the personnel. They still continue on the farm, so we've kind of built upon that. Maybe working a little bit with delegating a little better tasks. As simple as kind of bringing a whiteboard in where they can write supplies that are low, just kind of having like a calendarized. A lot of the stuff on the farm is not very complex. There's a lot of repetitive tasks, and just setting a lot of these things in order. That was done. That was very helpful. To go back to answering your actual question, there was not a lot of advice being given from anyone from the outside. In general, I do not think that any advice that was given, kind of looking back, would be bad with any respect. The worst thing that can happen with bad advice is you gave it a shot and it didn't work out. Nobody ever died from taking bad advice, unless it's life-threatening, obviously. But no, there wasn't really a lot of advice taken. It was a little rough. It was a little rough in the beginning. From the farm side, there was a lot of kind of jumping into a void there. You really don't know what was expected. We kind of pulled through with a lot of the expertise just from the people that have been running this, steering this ship for a long time.
Kris, tell me about some different milestones that you've had since you started here and the incremental steps that it took to hit each of those.
Coming to the farm was very daunting. First milestone, I'd say, was we remodeled the spice shop. The way my dad had everything set up before, he was had a very loose grasp on what was happening on the farm. So the spice shop was at the back end of the farm. There was no POS system in place, nothing. I do not even think that he had even a tracking of inventory of what was sold. And if he did, there was no documenting of it. So pretty much he had these loose slips of what every person bought, but no way of actually documenting it. And no POS system. So basically, there was no use for this paper trail that was done, because if that's not being put anywhere, you pretty much don't know anything that's going on. So I wanted the spice shop to be at the front end of the farm. I wanted there to be more control, more visibility, more people around the area. We have some guides on the farm. They're very trusted. I know they have no bad intentions, but they usually, before, when my dad had running, they ran everything. So actually they ran the tour. They would collect all the fees. They would basically run the spice shop too, and then they would basically hand a wad of cash to my dad at the end. Definitely not the right way to go about it. So we brought the spice shop to the front end of the farm. That was the first step. Implementing a POS system. So there was a digital kind of paper trail, everything that's being sold, a receipt for everything. And just remodeling the spice shop itself, I mean, it was such a shame. All these years, my dad had pretty much a gold mine on him, had such a nice product, but wasn't properly exploited. His packaging was not very nice for such a high-end product that we actually has. I mean, we're talking about organic spices here. I mean, you can glance online. There's several places online. I mean, organic spices, pretty much sky's the limit to the price. But the spice shop needed a little facelift. Basically, before he ran the spice shop out of the warehouse itself. So basically, there are people packaging stuff. You cannot even have a clear divide between the kind of the packaging area of the farm and also the spice shop. You're basically walking into a packaging area. Not very nice to look at. Very, well, that's my opinion, not really nice to look at. We kind of give a facelift there to the farm, to the spice shop. And we did that literally kind of taking the first couple months of COVID, where we would say, hey, this is not going to be that long. Plus, there's nobody coming in. Let's just kind of take a win with that. In retrospect, it was a good decision because it had to be done. But was it scary, boy? There's a lot of income invested in that, and not knowing when the return was going to actually come. That was a little tricky. So we would consider that maybe the first milestone. Along the way, some minor milestones, giving the infrastructure of the farm a little facelift, fixing the trail up a little bit. Like I said, a lot of the stuff that my dad had implemented, the idea was definitely there, but the execution of it was definitely not in place. For such a nice product, just a little bit nicer. The type of tour that we have here is very unique. It's very educational, very guide-led. You're kind of walking through the forest, having this guide explaining a lot that's done on the farm. So we kind of made it prettier. Like I said, giving a farm a little facelift. Another major milestone was definitely bringing the farm up to date. What do I mean by this? Literally officially having what they call here a patente municipal. So being all in line with the everything legal here, which is not really hard to do. Bringing in a credit card system in, having people being able to pay however they'd like. And maybe finally a huge milestone was having our online booking system running, where a lot of the load had been taken off a lot of people that were doing this manually before, kind of streamlining that and having people being able to perform a lot of these tasks online at 24 hours a day, 265 days a year.
What are some common misconceptions about the tourism industry and farming that you find to be?
Okay, yeah, let's go about debunking some of the popular hearsay around. With the tourism side, well, I think applied to both in general. Number one, kind of starting a small business in Costa Rica, that everything is very hard. There is a lot of red tape around a lot of stuff, but once you really dive into it and are persistent and organized mainly, and you get all the documents in order, are patient with the people that you're dealing with, I think everything's pretty easy. With the tourism side, I think one of the misconceptions is maybe it's a little too easy. Pretty much we are very fortunate to kind of have as a backdrop Manuel Antonio National Park here in Quepos, which is the most visited national park in the country. So a lot of the times you might think that you have this kind of free-flowing, endless supply of people coming in. You pretty much don't have to invest anything, or pretty much it's all too easy, right? Pretty much easy money, but that's not the case. You really have to focus well on marketing. Know where your audience is, what audience you're trying to attract to the farm, and then kind of double down on that. That I'd say is a misconception of the tourism side. When applied to the agriculture part, I think one of the main misconceptions is it's very hard. It's not easy. You need a lot of insight to it. You need a lot of either have knowledge passed down to you, or maybe have gone to school for it. A lot of the tasks are very repetitive. There is a science to everything. If you know what type of environment you're growing in, if you know what's your target, how much actual area you have to grow on, you can kind of pretty much mold whatever you have on the farm for that. Thrown into that, if you flip the switch, you might think that farming is too easy. It might be one of the hardest things at the same time, whereas the constant unknown variables that are thrown into a kind of very fixed equation are changing. You're literally dealing with climate aspects. You're dealing with different seasons, changing seasons. You're dealing with over farming. You're dealing with natural catastrophes. That is very tricky. That's a very tricky aspect about it.
And looking back to 2019, what would you tell yourself if you could go back in time? Tell yourself the first day you showed up here as the Jefe. What would you tell yourself?
I would definitely say it's all going to work out. Don't overthink. Don't waste time. If at first anything kind of looks hard, looks like it won't be able to become accomplished, paperwork, getting some what they call here trámites, whatever, I would say it's all very easy when you look into it. It's just a couple papers here and there. It's a little bit of patience. It's a waiting game, and it's timing stuff accordingly. I'd give that advice to myself.
And what advice do you have for someone who is just starting out or wants to start their own business?
I'd say be persistent. Persistency is key. Discipline is key. Know your audience. Know your product very well. A little bit of knowledge beforehand on that is definitely key. I think a lot of small businesses fail primarily because of this key point, where you don't really know what you're selling and you don't know who you're selling it to. That's pretty much at the backbone of it. But if you pretty much have these two elements, these two parts of the equation under control, I think you can be very successful.
Like, what advice would you give someone who might have an opportunity to step into the family business and take over?
Family dynamics are very complicated. It's not easy. Family businesses are not easy. It was not easy transitioning from my dad. Boy, was it. It was a doozy. My dad is a very, very strong character. Very hierarchical here on the farm. There is a very clear line about who was the boss here on the farm. It was not easy. It was definitely not easy. If you kind of throw into that what he was going through health-wise, it kind of makes the equation all a lot trickier. I would definitely say number one, if there's any interest, first, number one, if there's any interest. There wasn't really that much interest with me, but that can always change. I don't know, circumstances change. I definitely would advise, which I do regret this from me, is all businesses have their nuances. So picking the right time to shadow would definitely be very important. Who to shadow? Not necessarily does it always have to be the head of an organization, the head of a person. It's to kind of have some leeway to see what are the key aspects of the business, who are these key players, who do you really need to shadow, what is the backbone of the business. That would be very important to do.
All right. Well, Kris, let's say thank you for having us here at the farm. If people want to come visit you, if they want to buy your spices, how do we go about doing that? And are you on social media?
Yes. So we have a tour on the farm, tour and also spice sales. You can all do through our website. The name of the farm is Villa Vanilla, but the brand that we sell pretty much everything under is called Rainforest Spices. So that would be rainforestspices.com for any spice sales and also tour bookings. We do ship worldwide, so you can find us there. You can find us on social media too under the same name, Rainforest Spices Villa Vanilla, for all our interesting posts.
Thank you for watching this episode of Bizpirations. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you're ready when the next episode comes out in 2 weeks. We'll see you then.